The future of work. What are accomplished leaders looking for today in their careers? What is career success, and has this definition changed? What do you need to do in order to achieve career success? What do employers have to do in order to make their high potential stars happy? Well, if you want to learn about workplace satisfaction and more, you definitely need to watch Toronto Speaks Careers and Hiring. Welcome to Toronto Speaks, Careers and Hiring. I'm Richard Wajs, President of TWC International Executive Search and your host. And tonight I'm delighted to be joined by two outstanding guests, each with their own personal stories of successful career advancement, as well as extensive track records in career development and hiring. Together we're going to look at how the workplace has changed in recent years, what people today seek to get out of their careers. We'll identify key factors that lead to people taking steps in order to improve their career situations. And if you're an employer, we'll discuss how you can create a corporate culture that aligns effectively with today's talent and thereby making you an employer of choice. So thank you both for coming today. Really appreciate it. This is going to be very exciting, I think, for the viewers. So we'll start with Mary Jo. Mary Jo Hewat is a pragmatic human resources executive who leads from the business lens to enhance HR credibility while meeting the longer-term strategy of the business. She's worked in a number of industries, financial services, mining, retail, and professional services, and operated in both a global and a national capacity. Her values-driven leadership style has contributed to her and her team's success. And she leads the HR function at Genworth Canada, Canada's largest private residential mortgage insurer. Michael Carter. Michael is the co-founder and CEO of Kahuso Inc., a disruptive technology platform that intelligently connects accomplished executive and professional talent with companies for contract, full-time board, and advisory opportunities. Michael's a former management consultant, and he turned into a serial tech entrepreneur. Michael co-founded Kahuso in 2015 to reshape the future of work and, more specifically, reimagine how executive work happens for both accomplished individuals and companies alike. So thank you again, both very much for coming.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the workplace and the expression that I think, Michael, you especially have brought to the table in our discussions, the future of work. And Mary Jo, you've talked about the importance of some terms that we hear a lot about, but what do they really mean? So, you know, when we think about authenticity, values-based leadership, and being true to yourself, what do these terms really mean in today's workplace, and why should employees and employers care about them? Mary Jo, you want to start off?
Sure. Okay. Well, I think the workplace is evolving, and in a positive way. I think the needs of our employees are changing, and the workplace needs to change to meet those changing or evolving demands. If we reflect back on the workplace as it was when, you know, if I think of my parents growing up in the workplace and the expectations, both from the basis of the employer and the employee, that environment has changed dramatically, and as an employer, we need to be keeping track of that to make sure that we are an employer of choice.
So when you say that you're seeing changes, what have you seen? What have you witnessed that has been a major change?
Well, I think something as simple as technology, right? So the whole concept of work-life balance is one that it continues to be a challenge both for employers and for employees, and I think that is, a challenge that people face both on an individualized basis as well as from a corporate lens. So, you know, back to your point in terms of values alignment or authenticity, it is making sure that as an employer, you're very honest about what's important to you. And as an employee, you're very honest about what it is that you need in order to, you know, be at your best at work.
So the employee should be expressing that, and so that the employer actually understands the employee as best as possible.
Yeah,
knows what they want.
I view the authenticity piece as a two-way street. You know, I think open and honest communication around that is critical.
Great.
Yeah.
Michael?
Yeah, I think what's interesting we're finding is there's a lot of different forces at work here. And I think on the company side, if you just look at, how things have evolved in the last 5 to 10 years, with technology, business is moving at a much faster pace, things are happening, opportunities are opening up, markets are opening up. It's creating different demands on companies, I think, nowadays than they did a long time ago. At the same time, you've got our boomers moving into a different stage of life, and I think while boomers are kind of shifting gears to a more value-based environment, you have millennials coming up in the other end that are already in that gear. And so as you think of value-based kind of career management and so forth, you just naturally have an aging population here where people are moving into transition years and are kind of thinking differently about what's next. There's no such thing as retirement anymore, right? Gone are the days where people kind of go and spend time in Florida. I shouldn't say gone are the days, but for the most part, there's a bit of a shift afoot where this valuable talent is hitting the market. They still want to work. They just want to work very differently. And companies that don't pay attention to that are going to get left behind because of their own demands. And so you've got, I think, an executive pool that's starting to think a lot differently. And you've got companies that are forced to think differently if they're going to not only attract that kind of talent, but also keep them engaged and retained. And so it's creating this shift that I think is quickly becoming the norm here, that is shaping the future of work in a pretty dramatic fashion.
So what is it that, let's say, the previous generation wasn't asking for that the current generations are asking for? What's new in the workplace from your perspectives? What's changed? When you say, you talk about values, and I get it, but their demands are different, and what do the old guys like me want that the new guys don't want, or vice versa?
Yeah, I don't know that it's a good question. I mean, I think it's just, I think what's changing, again, if you look at kind of the demographic shifts and socioeconomic shifts, I mean, I don't think it's so much as what's happening as much in the workforce as your own wants and needs, right? I mean, most executives, my dad's generation or mine even, have worked their tail off for so long that as they hit those golden years or transition years, certainly the ones that we speak with are still feel like they have a ton of value to add, but they had other dreams and other aspirations of getting more meaning out of their work or more fulfillment out of their work. So it could be, you want to dabble in not-for-profit, you want to help mentor somebody, you want to take more of a portfolio approach to what you're doing with your career. And so I think it's just a natural evolution of where you are at the stages in your life, and you're transitioning out of necessarily wanting to work that hard is the wrong expression, because I don't think people are afraid of hard work because you've been doing it for a long time. They just want to work differently, and I think that's becoming the norm. Like, I look at my father, who's 76 years old, he still works in a senior capacity 2 days a week. Still loves it, still happy to be working, but just something that mattered to him, and the rest of his time he can do other things that really inspire him and get him excited. We had one executive on the platform, actually, who has led a phenomenal career, and when we first launched the company, he hunted us down and sat us down. He said, I've been the CEO of this international company for many years, and I always had this vision of, at the age of 55, I didn't want to do the same thing or work for the same company or be in the same role my whole career. And I felt like there were so many other things that I wanted to do. So now I'm at a stage in my life where I can afford to try those things and do those things. So I just think there's a bit of a natural evolution, as well as how business is shifting and how jobs are shifting. I read a really interesting thing today that said, 25 years ago, 65% of the jobs today did not exist 25 years ago. And so with technology, roles are changing so fast, businesses are changing so fast. And so gone are the days where I think you can kind of pick a career path and think, okay, that's what I'm going to do for the next 20, 30, 40 years with minimal kind of pivots, if you will. And I think there's just so many factors that play into this shift that it's not, I wouldn't even go as far as saying it's necessarily an intentional shift. There's a natural shift happening, this whole idea of the gig economy. And where, it used to be reserved for skill-based workers. So you'd think of it, be it a trade or creatives or developers. And I think that shift is now happening with thought leaders and people in strategic roles or leadership roles. And it's just the evolution of where work's going.
Mary Jo, what have you seen in your workplaces in the last little while in terms of the demands or the shifts?
Yeah. Well, and I think the bookend to what you're talking about are the millennials that, have grown up with parents that made a lot of sacrifices. We're in a very different work environment, and they're actively choosing to do it differently, right? I think that they've got a lot more choice available to them. I think with the advent of technology and social media and the like, their networks are unbelievable.
You're seeing more.
And they're just seeing more, and their knowledge base is that much greater. So if they are unsatisfied where they are, they have no hesitation whatsoever in saying, you know what, my life, my sense of self is not completely tied to my job or my place of employment, which, you know, is not necessarily the norm if we reflect on, you know, some of our upbringing where that
You're
sense of
defined by your
identity
work.
was very much
what you
defined by
do.
that.
And
Precisely.
you're saying that it's not so much the case
They're
anymore.
choosing to say, hey, there's more to me than that.
And you know, work used to be defined as a place you went to, and I think work, the definition of work is changing. And it's, I often hear people talk about, you know, as we've evolved the company, you know, people choose a permanent or a stable career. Well, there's no such thing as stable anymore, right? It's a series of engagements, not a stable engagement. And I hear this neat expression all the time where, you know, gone are the days where organizational structure was really defined by a pyramid. It's more of a jigsaw puzzle now. And how do you put the right pieces in place at the right time to make sure you're evolving your business at the right pace? And it's all these different, it's kind of really interesting because I think all these little factors are impacting it.
Yeah. You know, it's tough in my world, you know, because, you know, I'm reading CVs all day long. And, you know, the employers say to me, well, if they haven't worked for 5 years minimum at company ABC, then, you know, there's something potentially wrong with them. And I'm talking to, obviously, you know, a 55-year-old oftentimes or whatever, someone who's, you know, well advanced in their careers. And, you know, to temper that with what you guys are talking about is sometimes not the easiest thing to do. You know, you know, and of course, and I think most people would know that, you know, IT professionals typically move a little more. You'll see that, okay, they worked, you know, one year here, 2 years, 3 years. I guess at the end of the day, I mean, what I have to tell an employer about these people is if there's a justified reason and it's reasonable and it makes sense to you as the potential next employer, you have to give it some consideration, but you balance it with everything else in the way you evaluate someone, obviously. But you know, I think that it's going to be quite interesting as people start looking at CVs more and more in the next in the upcoming years, because you're going to see very different profiles in terms of loyalty. I mean, now loyalty is almost a bad thing. And I mean, when I mean that, I mean, you know, 20, 25 years, because the reverse I was hearing is, well, they've only worked at one company for 25 years. They're unemployable anywhere else. I mean, that's just the way it is, you know, and, which is also not really fair, and it's not really, you got to get to know the person, you know, I still believe.
I think the flip side holds true as well. We used to look at resumes where you saw someone skipping between jobs every couple of years. You frown upon that and say, well, geez, they're not loyal, they can't hold it down. And I think that attitude is shifting as well towards, man, you may have, especially it's what you've done, not how long you've been there, right? So you may have done some really interesting things that are very relevant, be it on a contract or a 2-year stint, and it's almost championed, not frowned upon now, depending on the individual.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is, if there is a move that has happened from a career perspective that is not performance related and is justifiable for, you know, and the person, you're sitting with the person, they explain the reasons for their move, and it was because it was a good career advancement or whatever it was, you have to give that person, you know, some kind of chance in terms of, you know, giving them real consideration. But it's amazing how, you know, it's still frowned upon in a lot of places, and all I can say is to an employer, let's look at the whole picture and let's just see, you know, what has this person done overall. If you see a constant history of rapid movement and it doesn't seem justifiable, okay, those are red flags for sure. So.
And I think to build on, you know, the concept of what used to be a career ladder and really doesn't exist anymore, it really is about the experiences. So what was it that you experienced in that role? What was your accomplishment? And then that's where I think you morph into, you know, potentially where you see pockets in certain industries where they'll pay a premium for that experience. It's not going to be a full-time job. It's going to be a contract. It's going to be, you know, I need this done. You know how to do it. I'll pay you 3 times the price because you're going to get it done in a fraction of the time, and I know you know how to do it.
Your point actually comes back to something we did on another show we recorded recently, where the person brought up this concept, instead of corporate ladder, it's corporate lattice, because you want someone to gain the breadth of experience and bring that to the next employer, and especially, you know, this upcoming generation, millennials or whatever you want to call it, they seem to have an appreciation for that I've got to gain a wide breadth of experience in order to make myself appear more valuable to future employers, which was not always the case with the previous generations.
And I think companies are demanding it too, right? Kind of post-recession, there's lean management now, caps on cost. A lot of executives or young professionals moving up the lattice, if you will, are being asked to wear multiple hats. So you have to be agile, you have to be flexible, and you know, gone are the days. I do think that it's kind of, you've got your sliver and that's all you do. You go do your task of work and you go home, and it's more outcome-based, right?
Right. So both of you have been hiring managers or employers in one way or another, or an HR executive. What do companies either do or have to do to accommodate this new world that we're living in? What action steps can they take? You know, what behaviors are they going to have to change in order to make the workplace that much more attractive to these people, and not only to attract them but to retain them? What have you seen?
So I think some of it is education in terms of what's happening, and I think, you know, the ones that I really admire and respect are those that recognize that this is an experience and that we really do need to focus on the employee experience. We need to focus on what it is that we are doing to help them build their resume, and recognize that there may come a time that they do need to leave. You know, ideally they'll go have other fantastic experiences and bring them back to that employer, as opposed to the days of, you know, you stay at that employer and that sense of loyalty. So it's a different type of loyalty. You want that employee to, you know, ideally you don't want them to leave, but perhaps it is the right time. You want them to speak highly of the organization. You want them to refer fantastic talent to the organization, and ideally be a talent agent for the organization, even though they're not there anymore.
Right.
And reward systems have to change as well, I think, right? So you're rewarding performance a bit, but it's the outcome, and so it's not rewarding title or tenure. It's really thinking through. You could have the most junior person in the world, and you want to make sure that from the top down, that's kind of the proper reward systems are in place to kind of make sure that those individuals are appreciated or kind of moving through the organization accordingly.
I find this a really wonderful discussion, and we can take this point, you know, into probably 3 shows because there's just so much going on, and so many people have this concern, you know, on both the employer and the employee side. What do we do now in this new world? So, you know, I'm happy we talked about it. I think one of the things would be interesting to do is, Michael, maybe we can talk a bit about your career. And one of the things, because I think you've made a lot of very interesting career transitions, we can talk about how challenging that is. And you've also done that, Mary Jo. I've seen what you've done. You know, but so that's one thing. And you maybe, you know, put into this conversation also how something you brought up to me when I, at one point when I know you made a change, you talked about the work-life balance issue. And that, and you know, yes, the millennials seem to be all about that. Everybody thinks, but you weren't at the time when you made that decision, you know, and you took the risk, and the risk is a big issue, obviously, and I'd love to know what your thinking was. What was your what mental processes were going around when you made some of your changes?
I think I had my dad say that I was absolutely insane for making the change, because back in the way he would have thought is, you've got a great career, great job, it's paying you well.
I was a lawyer or a doctor, and here we are. So, you know.
And it's funny, I would attribute any success I've had to really start with the foundation that I created in the first part of my career, which is in management consulting, which I had the opportunity to meet you. And so I spent, you know, 7 or 8 years in a tier 1 management consulting firm, and it was, you know, very demanding. It was one of the best things I loved about it is you're just surrounded by incredibly smart people all the time.
Thank you.
The firm was, present company included. The firm, actually funny, even back then, culturally was very, very good at, can't say work-life balance, because in that world you're traveling all the time and you're working long hours, but they really focused on what the free time you did have to make the most of it, and they were very accommodating when you needed to take time here and there and the other. I mean, it was a really neat company to work for. But to your point, it was interesting because I kind of hit this wall. I'd recently been married. I just had my wife had just had our first child, and I just had, you know, I don't know what it was. It was this feeling that I'd always aspired to start my own business, and I don't mean to disparage the consulting industry in any form because I owe a lot to it, but I didn't want to be a weekend dad and I didn't want to be a weekend husband. And I kind of feel sometimes funny that I feel like I'm caught between the millennial and the boomers, even though I'm a Gen Xer, because I do think I can have it all. I always believed I could have a really successful career that I could be very proud of, and I could be an amazing dad and I could be an amazing husband. And so, and that's not to say there aren't phenomenal dads and husbands or wives and mothers in consulting. It just wasn't the right long-term fit for me. And so you're right, you get to this point where you're going, holy crap, this is a big step. Our family income kind of went from 100% to 30% overnight. And you know what, I had a mentor of mine at the time. He was a friend of my father's, and he actually sat me down and he said, what's the worst thing that's going to happen to you? So you take this leap, what is the absolute worst thing that's going to happen to you? Can you, I mean, if you can accept that, then what are you waiting for? I mean, if that's not so bad, when you really think about it, what's the worst thing? And so it just got me thinking, you know, at the end of the day, I had the reasonable degree of confidence that if I had to go back into consulting, I probably could have gotten another job. I might have been fortunate enough to have been invited back to the same firm if I was lucky. So what was the risk of giving this a shot? And I did, and you know, it was the best decision I ever made at the time. And again, I think part of what helped me be a successful entrepreneur were absolutely the first 8 years of my career there. And so, you know, embarked on that journey, and I can't say I worked any less. I can't say it wasn't any less stress. It was just a different way to work, right? I had more control, I had more flexibility. I probably worked longer hours, but I worked them on my terms, not the client's terms or a firm's terms, right?
And in the same city as your family.
Yeah.
a lot of the time. Most of the time.
I traveled some, but I mean, it was, so I you know, it was just a conscious choice at the time to make that change, and I'll never forget. And my dad's amazing, but he just, in his generation, I mean, you have a great job, they pay you well, you're on a good trajectory. I don't care whether you love it or not, you keep going because you have a responsibility to your family.
Absolutely.
And I think those times are changing. And so the chairman, when I started that, and he said, you'll never go back and you'll always be an entrepreneur now that you have a taste of it. So it's, I think there's this notion of the fear of failure, I think holds a lot of people back. And if you can wrap your head around the fact that, especially, I think at that stage of most people's careers, if you've had some measure of success, the other expression the guy uses, you might fall down, you're not going to fall very far, and you're probably going to get up pretty damn quickly. So again, what do you have to lose by doing it? And it's just that taking that leap of faith and believing in yourself that you can, and that's not necessarily an easy thing, but it worked out well.
Yeah, well, that's inspirational words. Mary Jo, what have, in your career, when you've had to make changes and you know, where you had to take some risk, what are your learnings from all this?
So I think, you know, while different, mine were typically a change in employer and industry, but it was absolutely worthwhile. It was a push yourself out of your comfort zone. It was the I had a boss who said, you know, if your palms aren't sweaty, you're not trying hard enough. And I always think of that. So when I feel uncomfortable about something, I know it's a stretch opportunity. There's going to be times that I'm going to fail. But, you know, sometimes I learn the most from those failures.
Right.
So.
Just on that, it's interesting, because I've had a couple people tell it to me. I think people are embracing failure a lot more now than they used to as well, even in the recruiting process. I saw one of the senior guys at Uber speak recently, and he said, I don't know of a senior executive on the team that hasn't had some level of failure. I mean, he made light of it, but he said, we really cherish the failures.
They're learning. It's great learning.
Absolutely. And there's another guy that I've met who said, you know, CEO of a very big tech company said, I don't hire other executives that can't tell me a good failure story. I just refuse to do it because it just tells me they haven't kind of pushed themselves far enough. They haven't gone out on the ledge. And it's just interesting because again, all these little shifts that are happening are impacting the way we work.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll see it in executives that haven't had that experience, what I call the humbling experience. And it's dangerous, right? So for some of them, it's actually dangerous because they didn't have some of those experiences early in their careers. And as a result, you know, they might think that the capabilities are slightly different from where maybe they should be, or they don't reach out to people the way that they could and consult and seek the input because they just
based on the past.
They haven't failed, right? So not to the extent that they really understand the value and merit in true collaboration, in, you know, bouncing ideas off of somebody else, and they're the ones that I'm usually a little wary of.
Right.
For sure.
So it's not even on the paper, but I'm going to talk about this anyway because you guys sort of led me into it. Okay. And you know, you both can talk about it. But I just find it fascinating doing what I do in search that so many times, you know, when we're being asked to put the square peg into the square hole, and you guys have moved around the industry. This is what what you said, Mary Jo, actually kind of leads me more into it because moving from industry to industry, can't people not be the square peg and into that square hole and still be good candidates? I mean, normally when they come to me, it's because they really want that. You know, that some will give lip service. Some employers will say, well, we'd like someone who's a bit out of the box. But you know what? At the end of the day, oftentimes, even when you have that out of the box candidate, if you have someone who's close and can bring ROI or revenue sooner, let's say, they still go for that person. I'd love to get your thoughts about this as people who've had to bring people into your businesses.
I think it's a shift in thinking from an experience base to a skill base, right? So I think of the different roles I've had around. I mean, every time I've made a switch, you do a lot of thinking around what are you really good at? What is the expertise that you bring to the table that kind of transcends industry or even functional area for that matter? You could have been a great marketing resource, but you had certain skills that you've demonstrated that may be incredibly applicable to operations or even sales or what have you. So it's really understanding yourself, I think, and being able to package up the skills you have and the raw expertise that you can bring to the table that I think makes the experience base less relevant in a lot of cases. And I think that's where you find companies saying, I want somebody that's a bit different. Well, they're not all, I mean, the expertise isn't necessarily all that different, just some of the experiences they've had might have been. And I think you still need some of that raw expertise.
Right, right. Yourself, Mary Jo, have you
Yeah,
seen
I would agree. I think it is about employers being crystal clear what it is that they need out of that role, and if they can find a candidate that can demonstrate success in doing that, irrespective of industry, that helps them see that, oh, maybe this person actually is a square peg, even though I initially thought they were round.
Right. I think where the exception might be to all of this is again, I use the revenue idea. Oftentimes employers want someone who can bring revenue in quickly, and they want someone who already knows their client base, and they know they have that network, so we don't need to wait 6 months to a year for that person to build that network. So for sales and marketing executives, sometimes it can be more of a challenge than other types of roles. That's just my I don't know. That's what I've noticed about it.
Yeah, maybe sales the most, but I'd say even marketing.
Yeah.
Find me a company today that's not looking for a digital ninja, is the
Oh,
expression.
yes,
Right?
absolutely.
I don't care what industry they're from. If you can find a good one, they'll learn your industry pretty damn quickly, right? So, yeah, sales I can understand if you want someone to come to the table with a Rolodex, but I would actually argue, depends how senior that role is as well, because if you're looking to bring in a leader that's going to mentor a sales team and so forth, then maybe yes, they have a responsibility to bring in revenue, but there's more to it than that. They may even be willing to go out of industry. It's different.
Well, you guys are great. I think the viewers have gotten a lot out of this. I certainly have, and unfortunately it's all the time we have this evening. So I really want to thank our great guests, Mary Jo Hewat and Michael Carter, for being with us and for their excellent insights. And I want to thank you, our viewers, for allowing us again into your living rooms, and we hope we've brought you some good food for thought in relation to your careers and hiring. And wherever you are in your career, I just advise you to follow your passion. I think these two people have done that at many times in their careers, and that'll take you where you want to go. So look forward to seeing you next time on Toronto Speaks, Careers and Hiring.